I am Tamar Ish-Shalom, and this is Jewish Crossroads. My guest today is Benny Gantz, chairman of Blue and White, the National Unity Party. Gantz is a former IDF Chief of Staff who entered politics in 2019 after more than 3 decades of military service. He has held several senior government positions, including Minister of Defense, alternate Prime Minister, and Deputy Prime Minister. After the October 7th attacks, Gantz and his party joined Israel's emergency unity government, and he became a member of the war cabinet before resigning from the government in June 2024. Shalom, Benny Gantz. Thank you for being with me.
Shalom, Tamar Ish-Shalom. Shalom.
We're speaking just days after Trump's meeting with Mamdani at the White House, so let's start with that. In their photo op, Mamdani accused Israel once again of genocide, not the first time for him. And President Trump, stayed silent. He didn't push back. How do you read that moment and the fact that this kind of language is now being normalized, even in the White House?
Obviously, it bothers me a lot. I think that this kind of language represents nothing from reality. But it is setting a stage for extremists to continue this direction. And I'm very sorry to hear that President Trump didn't stand against it immediately as he should. I just hope it just didn't notice or wasn't aware enough what was said there. I don't know. But, we've been dealing with Gaza for decades already. This is probably the 6th campaign I'm engaged vis-a-vis Gaza. We have tried everything else before. And we were left with no choice but to change the reality in Gaza and make sure that Hamas does not exist there as a governing element, definitely not with military capacity, which is being used to terror. And the amount of victims that we have seen, the cruelty that we have seen, it's like Daesh type of stuff in Gaza, left us with no alternative but to fight it. Along the road, of course, we continue to supply humanitarian aid, and one cannot come up with this, not genocide, not starvation, or any kind of these things. I'm a Holocaust survivor family, and I believe that 2 of 3 pillars of our life has to do with strength and being able to defend ourselves. And the second issue is the moral aspect of life. And we as Jewish people cannot give up on any one of those.
Let's move on to some important security issues. On the MAGA right, we're seeing a real surge in voices calling to end America's security guarantees to Israel. And it's not just talk, because the current agreement expires in 2028, which is just around the corner. And the question of what the next agreement will look like is already on the table very much. So first, let me ask you, as a former IDF Chief of Staff and Defense Minister, if tomorrow morning the U.S. canceled those guarantees, what would that actually mean for Israel's security?
Well, I think that practically speaking, it probably would make our life a bit more complicated, because we would have to shift sources and to figure out other ways to build our force. We don't have the alternative not to build forces. So if we would not get these American finance sources, then I guess that we would have to do something else within our budget. Israel is a strong country in terms of economy, and I'm sure we would find our ways. However, I want to suggest not to look at it as a finance aid, rather as an American investment. Most of what we get from the American is being used in the States itself, to the different defense industrial capacity of the United States, and to combine project that we have with the United States. So this is one part of the investment. And the second issue is that the security outcome that comes out of it for the Americans themselves, in terms of intelligence, technology, operational experience, it's very valuable. I think I know my colleagues in the DoD or the different military organizations of the states and security establishments of the states. They all think so like that. And let's take an example of the last event we had with the Iranians, right? We remember those stealth aircraft that came from nowhere and dropped the bombs on the nuclear site in Iran. How was it possible? Who cleared the way for the Americans to come and drop those bombs exactly when they were told to? So I think that in terms of cooperation, a lot is coming out of it for the Americans themselves. Someone said the other day that we are the biggest carrier the United States have in the Middle East, and in many ways it is so. So, seriously speaking, I do look at it from American perspective. I think it should be looked as an investment, and from our side, it's another element of our partnership, which is so important for us all. We are the only democracy in the Middle East. We are the only country that does not expect the United States to bleed for it. And I think we are the best partner the United States have. So if indeed that's the case, and I think it is, so it is an investment.
Yeah, so it's not a favor, it's a strategic asset for the U.S. The thing is that if you step out of, our shared Israeli identity for a moment and try to see things from the perspective of people who oppose these guarantees, there isn't like an internal logic there that needs to be addressed, because young Americans who believed in America first, that's what Trump promised, America first, and they say Israel's war isn't our war, and the billions going to Israel should be invested in the American young generation. It is the first generation that isn't sure that it will even be able to buy a home, a generation whose present and future feels economically unstable. So their argument is, we have nothing against Israel, but this money should be invested in us, in the young generation, not even in an important ally like Israel. So how do you respond to that? Because that is the discourse right now.
I understand that approach, but unfortunately, we don't really live in a very naive world. Everything goes to the right place in terms of what are the priorities, etc. United States is the world leader. And as the world leader, it is engaged in so many different arenas that it needs to be engaged. And if it won't be engaged in those arenas, then United States won't have this capacity to do what those people are trying to do, promoting education, infrastructure, everything.
So it interconnects.
Let's go back to the case of Iran, okay? I would suggest to look at Iran as a global challenge, as a regional challenge, and only then as a threat to the state of Israel. So if that is indeed the case, and I think it is indeed the case, so investing in us, it's helping the United States taking care of its global interests, not only the regional or definitely not only the Israeli interest. Iranian UAVs are exploding in Kiev, Ukraine. United States have the interest of promoting peace between Russia and Ukraine. It has to do nothing with us, but it has to do with the Iranians, and the Americans are indeed care about what the Iranians are doing, so we are helping to deal with the Iranians, etc., etc. So, maybe if we would live in a very naive world that there are no global challenges that the United States need to deal with, I could understand that. But that's not the case. If the United States wants to stay the leading power in the world, as it should, it means it has to be engaged in different places. That includes Israel, and the capacity that we are bringing back to the table as a result of that investment. I think it is crediting and helping any American to grow up in a safer situation.
Yeah, I guess the challenge is that isolationists in the MAGA camp want to withdraw from that leading part that America has in the world. If we, focus a bit on President Trump, in Israel, there is enormous appreciation across the political spectrum for President Trump because of the hostage deal. And I think that generally most Israelis really like Trump. But at the same time, Trump issued a U.S. security guarantee to Qatar, a promise to defend Qatar if it's attacked. And right now, he's pushing to sell F-15s to Saudi Arabia without conditioning it in normalization with Israel. So to put it simply, is Trump good for the Jews? Is Trump presidency good for Israel in the long-term strategic sense?
I think that President Trump is a great friend of the State of Israel. He has shown it in his previous tenure, and the result was Abraham Accord, and now he showed it again, and we saw what happened with Iran, what happened with the hostages, etc., etc. But Tamar, I want to take you to another example. When I was defense attaché in Washington for the State of Israel, I was asked by many Jewish people who should we vote for, and I obviously had to be a diplomat at the time, so I told them you should vote for whoever you think is the best president for the United States, because if he's the best president for the United States, by definition, he is the best president for the State of Israel as well. Because we definitely share the same values, we share most of our interests, so there's not much in between. And I look at it as a bipartisan issue. I respect every administration. I respect every president. I can speak of what presidents did for the State of Israel from the day it was on May 14, and from there on. It's not that we didn't have arguments and, it went up and down all the time as it can happen between friends. But seriously speaking, I don't think there is any other Israel for the United States in the Middle East, nor we have any other United States in the world. So I think we have to figure out how to work together.
What you're saying to me, Mr. Gantz,
very well. Say again?
No, what you're saying is that you were a diplomat. When you were an attaché here in Washington, and you're a diplomat right now as a politician.
It's become kind of second nature. But seriously speaking, let me tell you another story, an old story. When I was still young, which I'm not, I went through United States Special Forces Qualification School back in Fort Bragg. And I was a captain, 23 or 24 years of age. And all of a sudden, the guys called, says, Benny, we want you guys to come with us to have some beer in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So we and another Israeli colleague, we arrived to that bar at night, and all of a sudden we see ourselves, we are the only allies that are in the room. I mean, no one else, and there were more international students there. So we asked them, where are all the rest? And those young officers of the United States said then, well, there are allies and there are allies. So I think that authentically speaking, really the relations between the states and Israel is unique and important for both sides.
Yeah.
So I suggest that we'll figure out how to promote positive interest. How can we promote initiatives that serves both countries? Not that we are in the same size and we have the same impact. I remember who we are, but nevertheless, in terms of science and high-tech and intelligence and military capability, I think that every lesson learned that we have gained, morally speaking, we have to share it with our American colleagues because they don't have to bleed for something that we already bleed for, and we learn the lessons for ourselves. And I think we should share it with them.
So let's ask
as long as we keep these principles in a bipartisan manner in both directions of the ocean, and also moderation, I think we can keep this partnership for years forward. Moderation is very important, and I think that we should not go on extreme, not here and not in the States as well.
Well, we are in an era of extremism and not moderation. We'll talk about that further in our conversation. But specifically, does selling F-15s to Saudi Arabia undermine Israel's air superiority in the Middle East?
It's a danger that we have to be aware of. Back, I think it was 5 years ago already, I came to the States as a Minister of Defense, and we set about QME aspects with the administration. Then it was Trump's first administration. And we signed our agreements with ASPER and the DOD between them and me. And I think as long as we follow the principles of QME, which are very important, then I think it is doable. But once again, it's conditioned on keeping Israel's quality advantage, I would say, of the State of Israel in the region and making sure Israel's security superiority is being kept. It is legal aspect by American law. And the American president needs to explain once every 4 years to the houses how he keeps Israel's superiority. And we should appreciate that very much. I mean, you think of it, there is a special law in the States that requires the president to come to explain how he makes sure that Israel keeps its military superiority. It should be very much appreciated by us, and I think it is. But going back, I mean, of course, you cannot talk about the technical aspects of it, but going back, I think it serves American interest and Israeli interest as well. And I hope it will be kept this way. It will be kept. The United States will keep it this way, even in future definitions and deals that it makes.
Let's talk about the recent UN Security Council resolution that was drafted and promoted by the U.S. administration. On the one hand, it recognizes Israeli control of that perimeter in Gaza. On the other hand, for the first time in this conflict, it introduces international forces as a kind of buffer between Israel and Gaza, which could limit the IDF's operational freedom against Hamas. And it also lays the groundwork for a possibility of a future Palestinian state. How do you view this resolution?
It is a very complicated situation, and it reflects in a very complicated resolution. We don't want to control Gaza. And I've said before, and I can repeat it now, that it may take a whole decade until something can be built there that the Gazans people can live with and we can live beside. We have no interest in controlling the people of Gaza other than security. So we had a very difficult war, which was a strategic necessity. It was imposed on us, as you all remember. But we have to change the reality in Gaza. Now, it's true that the international forces, those who come in, might create a more complicated situation for us, but the alternative would be for us to do it ourselves. So that wouldn't make it maybe less complicated, but much tougher. And I'm not sure that whatever it was suggested there will work on the ground. I don't necessarily know that it's going to actually happen on the ground, especially when it comes to dismantling Hamas and taking care of operational infrastructure that was built there, etc., etc. But it's a way forward, and I hope that it will move in good directions, of course, for us, but also for the people of Gaza, who I think deserve to have normal life as well. Unfortunately, they were taken hostages by Hamas itself in 2007, and from there on they've been suffering from the fact that Hamas governed them. I hope it will change down the road, as this resolution is saying. As far as the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, we will have to see what's happening there in terms of reform, in terms of their activities against terrorist activities, etc. Israel took a very painful strategic lesson. It cannot afford invasion capacity anywhere around our borders. It cannot blink to security threat once those are being identified. And everything we want to do with the Palestinians, I think it has to be future performance-based conditional recognition, if at all. And I think that after October 7, the idea of a Palestinian state simply saying that might threaten Israel has been pushed even further down the road. I've suggested so many times to look at it as a situation, or I would say two-entity situation for the time being, where Israel has all the superiority in terms of security. Each one is taking care of himself, and those are kind of combined economies. And I hope we can create a better reference to re-discuss the future of the relations between us and the Palestinians. Once again, I was told, you cannot think of something that does not respect any kind of sovereignty by the Palestinian, and I've said all the time, but you cannot expect us to have any kind of security threat. And unfortunately, October 7 reminded us that it's just there is a justification for that demand. So I'm looking forward to see this future. As you remember, Tamar, I met with Abu Mazen 3 times. I'm willing to speak with whoever I can, but I'm committed to fight whoever I need. And we have to find this combination.
On October 7th, American Jews felt, maybe for the first time in half a century, that Israel's fate was not guaranteed, that its survival couldn't be taken for granted. And I think that 2 years later, after the Beeper operation with Hezbollah and the attack on Iran, that sense of security certainly has partly returned. But there is also a real hope of American Jewry and the diaspora to see Israel heal and thrive. We're speaking just a few days after the massive demonstration in Tel Aviv, calling for a state commission of inquiry, with most of the opposition leaders there, including you. How much, in your view, does Israel's ability to recover and heal depend on establishing such a committee, such an inquiry?
Yeah, this is a very challenging region we live in. I think as long as we stick to what made us win, we can strive. We won because we united. And it's true that though it's very hard to take Israel by surprise, but it has been proved twice already in history, we will never lose, because we are a very strong society. And we become strong society once we are united. And we put political divisions aside for the time needed. So going back to those two pillars I told you about, the one is of security and the other one is moral aspects, I would just add the third pillar, which is unity. Now, I'm not talking about uniformity. We have ultra-Orthodox, we have rightists, people, leftists, whatever you want. But we have much more in common than what divides us. And unfortunately, so far we let our enemies to define what's common with us. And I suggest that we let ourselves to define what's common for us. And once we can keep some kind of unity, once again, not uniformity, I think we can strive. I think it's a great society. And I'm actually, that's probably the biggest ideology I have, political ideology. And once again, I'm liberal and I don't want to give this up. I'm Jewish traditional and I don't want to give this up. I have a security consideration. I cannot give up on those. But I think we can figure out a way of living together with one another like a family, you know. It's Doron Peretz, the father of the fallen soldier Daniel Peretz from the Armor Corps, said that Israel might be one of the smallest countries in the world, but it is the biggest family in the world. And I think that once we behave like a family, it doesn't, you know, we all have our Friday night dinner, we all remember what the argument on the table looks like, but the family is still there. Going back to us as a society, if we somehow find a way to stay united, then we can overcome any challenge that will be on our road. And in order to be united, everyone has to give up something. As long as it's not his core values, he can give up things.
And to my
core values.
Yeah, but to my question, is establishing a state commission of inquiry needed to have this unity and to go forward?
I think it's crucial to have one, just like the law demands. I think we should go back and look at everything from around 2005, 2007, when Hamas found himself in Gaza and the end of the war, Second Lebanon War. I have 7 years I have to explain out of those almost 20 or 18, it depends how you count it. And I'm sure, and I know that the IDF debrief itself and investigate itself. So I'm not that much worried about what might be the military or the intelligence or that kind of conclusion, because we already know those. Serious issue would be to investigate our policy. Where were we in the last 20 years? What did we do right? What did we do wrong? Were our considerations the right one, or do we have to change something? Now, this is a very, very serious discussion that we have to do it. I disagree with the way the Prime Minister and the government is acting. It is delegitimizing the judicial system in a way that it makes it absurd for their voters to kind of respect whatever comes from this judicial system, and I don't think that's the case. I would respect any Supreme Judge, whether it's acting one or whether it's a previous one, to stand at the head of this committee. I am sure that he do his work the way he should, and I have no doubt about it. And I know it's a long process, and we are just wasting the time. Now the country will not heal before this wound become a scarf.
You mentioned
always feel it, you know. Whoever has a scarf on his body, he knows that you never lose this feeling. It's always painful, but at least you can live with it. And this national committee is a necessity for us to really go into the major issues, not the technical one. Those are not of that importance because the future will look different. But the principles, the heavy lessons, this is what should be investigated and discussed. And I don't even care for responsibility or guilt or at anyone. I'm just looking for the right conclusion.
You talked a lot about unity in your last answer, and I want to talk a bit about your political roller coaster from a candidate for prime minister with 40 seats in the Knesset to a situation where, according to current polling, you might not enter the next Knesset. Looking at the big picture, okay, beyond the political mistakes that every politician makes, the approach that you have consistently held is what we call in Hebrew mamlachtiyut. Now, there isn't a real good translation, right? Because it's a uniquely Ben-Gurion idea and expression. But if I'll try to explain in English, it's like civic responsibility or a sense of duty to the state, putting what's good for the country above politics. Do you think that your political collapse might come from the fact that this concept simply doesn't fit our era? I mean, we're in this age of political populism, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about Mamdani or Trump or Netanyahu or countless European leaders. they all represent this populist, polarized moment. So maybe mamlachtiyut simply can't win in an age like this, by definition.
I understand what you're saying. I've been through this roller coaster, as you said. I was the only one who got, I think, 35 or 36 real mandates against Netanyahu a few years back. Was the only one who rose almost to 40 during the war itself. But if you look at it, when did I start climbing from 12, which was my case at the beginning of the judiciary overhaul? I climbed to 19, 20-something when I called to come to an agreement between the sides about what should we do with the judicial system. And then the war started, and I came in with unity, and I grew even higher. So it means that every time that I grew in terms of mandates was not by being polarizing, but on the other hand, calling for agreements and going into emergency situation with unity, etc. Now, I also think that authenticity should be something which we keep, and that's who I am. I hardly hate anyone. I have no enemies inside the state of Israel. All my enemies are outside the borders of Israel or terrorist organizations that might operate inside the state of Israel, but I don't confuse between rivals and enemies. And I think we should not polarize the way it is being polarized, because once again, this is not Switzerland. We are not arguing about some theoretical issues. We live in a very, very demanding geopolitical arena. And once again, every time we split, every time the divisions are too high, our enemies get the message. And this is something we cannot afford. Once again, I don't think we're going to give up. I don't want to give up on the ultra-Orthodox society, nor do I am willing to compromise over their needs to serve our country. So what is left now, how we are doing it together. It's not, they're going to be here, I'm going to be here. Same stands for the Israeli Arabs. I mean, they are part of the society. It's true that post-October 7th, they cannot be part of the government, but they are equal rights citizens, and we should take care of
Why can't they be part?
Because I think that, unfortunately, the reality in terms of what Israel has felt had made it emotionally in a situation that we cannot, they cannot be part of the government itself. But even if you look at the Lapid's Bennett government, they were part of the coalition, but they were not part of the government itself. But once again, when I talk about national service, I demand everyone to serve the country, whether it's in military organizations, security organizations, emergency organizations, social work, whatever it is, as long as it is being recognized by the government itself. And everybody should be able to stand up and say, I'm an Israeli citizen, I've served the country the best I could, and let's take it from here. And I think we can create those kind of agreements. Now, once again, I even look at the government itself, the political situation. One bloc against the other bloc took us nowhere. It only polarized us more and get nothing. And even if you look at the polls right now, no side has the ability to build a government without the other one. So there's no other direction but unity. And I suggest, let us isolate extremists. Let the moderate majority that has different political sources, but it's moderate majority that is capable of agreeing with one another much more than leaning after its own extremist. And I think that's where the Israeli hope is. And I think when the elections will come, and once again, everybody talks about them, but they're not anywhere around. But once those elections are being called, people will start to think about the future, not only about their past anger. And I think the results will talk for itself.
Putting anger aside, on a deeper level, could it be that this kind of, let's call it radical moderation that you hold, that you represent, ends up normalizing extremism? Because you're always trying to find the middle point, while reality itself in the past few years is shifting to the extreme. And in the name of moderation and unity, you don't fully confront that extremism. As you know, this is one of the major criticisms of you from the center-left camp. How do you react to that?
I don't accept this criticism. I'm against extremists, whether they come from any directions, and I don't really compare those different directions because there are extremists and there are extremists.
It's balanced? Is it balanced between right and left in
Israel?
I
don't think it's balanced. I don't think it's balanced. But nevertheless, I think we should isolate those who might be post-Zionist on the left, or anti-Zionist on the left, or the extremist racist from the right, if you wish. And why is it possible to have a military unit with so many different views, but agreed framework and rules of game and mission that you keep the military unit together? Why can't it be in the government instead? And once again, I'm against those extremists. And when did I join in? I didn't join in for anyone for political reasons. When I joined in, it was for the country, because the country needed me. And people appreciate that. That was the case with the COVID, when people could not leave their house more than 50 meters, and we didn't even know what the death toll will be for the country. And that was exactly the case of the emergency case of October 7 war. And I didn't come, and I've said, it's not a political partnership, it's a destiny that we have to face together. And once, unfortunately, Netanyahu kept his activities led by political considerations and not national consideration, I stepped out. I actually did it. So people are criticizing me, but what did I prove? I proved that when the country needs me, I'll be there. And once again, if there will be a scenario which I cannot portray right now, that the country will need me, I hope it won't happen, because usually in case of emergencies, then I'll be there for the country. But what do the country need right now? The country needs to stop fighting itself, and to have normal life, and to have normal people in the government, and to give up those shouting all day long, and to do what the country actually needs, simply normality. And I think it can be achieved, and I'm sure I will achieve it.
Do you think that the next Israeli elections, as you said, we're talking about it all the time, but we don't know exactly when they will take place, but by the end of 2026, do you think the next elections will be fair and free?
Yeah, I think so, but we will have to make sure that it doesn't hope that we are leaning on, but actually we are working on it. We will have representative in every ballot, and we will do whatever we can to make sure it happens. I believe that there will be free, democratic elections. I don't think anyone will dare to do something else.
Right now, the coalition is attempting, there are all sorts of legislative efforts to outlaw some of the Arab parties. Yesterday, just a few days ago, Netanyahu has talked about taking the Muslim Brotherhood to outlaw them. That would affect Ra'am party as well. What do you think about those attempts?
I think those are very dangerous steps. People suggested that he who doesn't serve won't vote. And I voted against it, because I don't think you can compromise over democracy, and you should keep it whether you like it or not. And I don't think the government should try and prevent any party from running, other than the way we already have, if it's the racist or supporting terrorism or acting against the country. So we have the mechanism to make sure it doesn't happen. But it's not in the hand of the politician. It's in the hand of the judicial system, and I suggest it will stay there.
Okay, we've reached the last part of our conversation, the Jewish Crossroads questionnaire, 5 quick and fun questions. Are you ready, Mr. Gantz?
I'll try.
What's your earliest Jewish memory?
I was born in a small village, Kfar Achim. And when I was a kid, 5, 6 years old, I was walking my only grandmother to the synagogue for Slichot in Chodesh Elul. We had no roads, we had no lights. I had to go with a flashlight showing her the road every morning at 5, 6 o'clock. I would take her to Slichot and bring her back home, and only then go to school. Probably that's the earliest one I can remember. I know, looking back, what they did to me when I was 8 days old, but that's a different story.
If you could meet any Jewish figure from history, ancient or modern, who would it be and why?
Historically speaking, of course, I would like to speak with Moses and Ben Gurion. I think they were 2 giants that changed our people's life. More actuality, if I could stand between Begin and Rabin and figure out how they could talk with one another, that would be very interesting. And what they would have to say about what we see today.
What is your favorite or most meaningful Jewish tradition?
Friday night dinner, I guess, with my family, which is probably the only time, or almost the only time we get to see each other.
If you could jump 100 years into the future, in one sentence, what would you hope to see for the Jewish people?
The note I'm putting in the Kotel every time, Aveh Shalom Aleinu v'aseh Shalom Benenu, bring peace on us and make peace among us or between us. So I think that's what I would wish for.
Okay, so now from a sentence to a word. What's one Jewish word? It can be Hebrew, English, Yiddish, whatever, that feels particularly meaningful to you right now.
Staying a mensch.
Mensch, it is. Thank you very much, Benny Gantz, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Tamar. And once again, we are one people. We have one state. That's the only insurance we constantly have. And I suggest to keep it strong. And in order to keep it strong, please, 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 let's fight our enemies and at most argue between us. But let us not fight between us. This won't work. And I've said it's either shevet achim or milchemet achim. And I'd rather see shevet achim.
Toda.
Toda.
That's it for this episode of Jewish Crossroads. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to write to us at jewishcrossroadspod@gmail.com. Thank you to Tomer Atzabi Bar, who edited this chapter. We'll see you next time, same place, same journey, with a new voice. See you soon.